Good day, folks, and welcome to SKU Food Bottom Line Builder How-To Basics. Today we're going to talk about using the SKU Food Profit Wheel. Hello, my name is Gary Morton, and together with Peter Chapman, we developed SKU Food, a one-of-a-kind centralized resource for the food industry to help businesses grow their bottom line. What is a profit wheel? Well, a profit wheel is a handy little tool that you can use to calculate product markups and margins. And you can see it's not very big from, well, maybe you can't tell from this diagram, but it's only about 4 inches across. So it's handy to use, it's easy to put in your pocket, and it's convenient. We find that many people confuse the terms markup and margin. They often are misunderstood terms, and people interchangeably use them for the same thing when they shouldn't. Markup is calculated from a product's cost, and margin is calculated from a product's selling price. So there is a difference, and you don't want to mix them up because it can be costly, or costly for somebody anyway. At the very least, it's going to create a fair bit of confusion. So to speak the language of the retailer, you need to understand the terms markup and margin. If you're not sure the difference between markup and margin, or need a quick refresher, then I suggest you go and watch our other video in the Bottom Line Builder How-To Basics series, Understanding Retailer Math 101, Markup versus Margin. Yes, you can calculate markup and margin using math, but you have to remember the formula. And it's also possible to get a business calculator where it will do it for you, but they can often be expensive. In reality, the SKU Food Profit Wheel will do everything you need. It's easy to use, it's easy to calculate, and it's easy to carry around with you. So if you're ready to go and take a SKU Food Profit Wheel test drive, let's take it for a spin. First, I need to explain the profit wheel and how it works. The profit wheel has two wheels. There's an inner wheel and there's an outer wheel. The outer wheel has numbers that run from 100 round to 950. You will notice the decimal point has been omitted. That way 100 can be 1 cent, 10 cents, $1, $1,000, and so on. The inner wheel is divided in half. The top half is for calculating markup, and the bottom half is for calculating margins. And you can see in this diagram there's a blue line that goes right through the profit wheel, and it separates the two. On the top you'll see profit markup from cost price. On the bottom you'll see a margin of profit on selling price. If we start with the profit markup from cost price, we go over to the left, and you can see from the arrow of cost each markup, it starts at 0 and the price percentages go around to 200. The bottom half of the inner wheel is for calculating margin, and you'll see it labeled as margin of profit on the selling price. Find the arrow that says cost each margin, and you'll see percentages running from 0% right around to 65%. So it's a pretty simple device. There's two separate wheels, as you can see. Now let's use some examples to see how we could get along with the profit wheel and get you going with it. First, I'd like to start with a very basic markup calculation. Let's assume a cost of a product is $1 and the markup is 50%. So let's see what the selling price is. So what we do is we take, and we're using the top half with the profit markup from cost price, and we use the cost each markup arrow, and we line that arrow up with $1 or 100. Okay, now you've done that. You've lined that cost each markup arrow with 100. And remember, the decimal points are gone, so we're using it as $1. Then we follow the percentages along to 50% on the inner wheel. And we see that 50% lines up with 150 or $1.50. So if a product costs $1, the markup is 50%, then the selling price is $1.50. Now for comparison, let's do an example of margin. And the cost of a product is $1. The margin that your customer wants to get is 50%, and we want to see what the selling price is. So we're going to go around to the bottom half of the wheel, inner wheel, and that's the part that says margin on profit on selling price. So on the left, we're going to find the cost each margin arrow, and we're going to take that cost each margin arrow and we're going to spin it around till we find 100. And we're going to line that cost each margin arrow up on 100, and then we're going to follow along to the 50% margin, and we're going to see that 50% margin lines up at 200 or $2 in our example. So if a product costs $1 and the margin is 50%, then the selling price is going to be $2. Now you can also use the profit wheel in reverse to calculate the cost from a selling price. If you know the retail selling price, or the price it's going to sell for, and the margin or markup percent required, you can calculate the cost. Let's try an example calculating markup first. The retail price is $3.75, so you're going to locate on the outer wheel of your profit wheel $3.75 or $375. The markup is 35%, so on the profit markup from cost price, you're going to take 35% and line it up with $3.75. And then you're going to follow backwards or to the left to the cost each markup arrow, and it will tell you that $2.78 is going to be the cost price. So assuming the retail price is $3.75, the markup is 35%, the cost will be $2.78. Let's use a margin comparison. The retail price again is $3.75, so on the outer wheel you're going to locate $3.75 or $375. The margin this time is going to be 35%, and you're going to use the margin of profit on selling price portion of the inner wheel. So you're going to take 35% and line it up with $3.75. And then you're going to follow back to the cost each margin arrow, and it's going to tell you that that product is going to cost $2.44. So in the margin comparison, the retail price is $3.75, margin is 35%, and the cost will be $2.44. So now you can see the difference. This is where the problem can occur when margins and markups get confused. The price between the two calculations is 34 cents. Now that can be a lot of money for someone to have to absorb, and it can cause bad feelings or potentially jeopardize the sale. So it's important to get margin and markup straight. If you know a product cost and you know the product selling price, then you can use the profit wheel to calculate the margin and the markup percent. I'm going to use a margin example. What I want you to do is, the cost is going to be $3.75, so locate $3.75 on the outer wheel. Then line up your cost each margin arrow at $3.75. Then follow along the percentages, follow along on the outer wheel to 500. Now you're going to look over at the percentages on the inner wheel, and you'll see that it's 25%. So if a product cost is $3.75, it sells for $5, the margin is 25%. Now this can be important in your negotiations with your customers. You know what you want to sell for, you know what your customer needs to sell it for, and then you can determine, is the margin enough for your customer, or will they expect you to lower your price, or do you expect them to lower their margin? And this is where it becomes a great negotiator tool. Let's have a look at how we could use the profit wheel for calculating discounts. You're selling your product to your customer for $3.75. The customer wants a margin of 40%. That means the product would retail on the store shelf for $6.25, based on these criteria. However, the customer comes to you and says, I'd like to sell this product for $5.99. I think that's where it fits best, but we still want to keep our margin at 40%. What's your cost going to be? So to calculate your cost, we take the profit wheel and we look on the outer wheel and we find $5.99. Then we line up 40% on the inner wheel, margin of profit on selling price side, and we put 40% at $5.99, and then we follow back to the left to the cost each margin, and we're going to see that the cost of that product, if it was retailing for $5.99, the margin is 40%, the cost would need to be $3.60. So the question you have here is, can you afford to do this? You were originally offering that product for $3.75. The customer's telling you they're only wanting to pay $3.60. That's a 15% discount. Is that in the cards? Can you do that? Or is it time to negotiate? We can also use the profit wheel when we're looking at comparing pricing. You're selling your product to your customer for $3.60. The customer margin is 40%. It's retailing on the store shelf for $5.99. However, you look over and you see your competitor with a very similar product, and their product sells for $5.49. We know the customer margin is 40%. The question is, how much is the customer paying your competitor for that product? Find $5.49 on the outer profit wheel. Then spin the inner profit wheel on the margin side around to 40% and line it up with $5.49. And if you follow back to the cost each margin arrow, you'll see that the customer is paying your competitor for that similar product $3.29. So there it is, folks. You can see that the profit wheel has some very useful applications, and it's a very handy tool. Let's recap what you've learned. You've learned in this video how to use a SKU Food profit wheel. You've learned how to use the profit wheel to calculate a markup, and you've learned how to use the profit wheel to calculate a margin. You've learned how it can help you buy better, and you've learned how you can use the profit wheel to check your pricing quickly. You've learned that the profit wheel can be a very handy tool. The SKU Food profit wheel makes it easy for you. I would suggest that you go back and watch our other video in the SKU Food Bottom Line Builder How-To Basics series. It's called Retailer Math 101, Markup versus Margin, and it goes deeper into the difference between markup and margin. For more information on building your food business bottom line, please visit www.skufood.com. That's www.skufood.com. SKU Food offers members community, group coaching, one-on-one masterclass, consulting, and research projects. Thank you very much for watching this video.